I can remember exactly when I sort of first became aware of Richard Attenborough's work. Like sort of all teenagers of a certain type, I was obsessed with the novels of Graham Greene, and obviously I'd heard about the film version of Brighton Rock, and obviously it had this amazing reputation and Richard's performance in it particularly. But obviously, like sort of any teenager that's kind of obsessed with a particular novel, you kind of go into a film version with a certain amount of trepidation, thinking it can never be the story that you have in your head. And I remember seeing it for the first time and just being astonished at the way that Attenborough had captured the central character, and it just made me go out and seek out everything that he'd ever done. And I remember sort of trotting around video stores constantly looking for Richard Attenborough films that he'd starred in, that he'd directed, and just every time finding something new and starting to get this picture of the artist, and that a lot of the concerns that I was starting to form and the opinions I was starting to form sort of politically and about the world were being echoed, and there was this enormous humanity in all of the films that were kind of really resonated with me, and it kind of helped to sort of break me out of that kind of teenage cynicism. I remember seeing Shadowlands for the first time in the cinema when I was about 17, and just becoming so emotional. Even though it was not sort of a part of life yet with which was familiar, and even though it was something I hadn't yet experienced, it kind of spoke to me on a kind of innate level. And I knew not only was I learning something more about sort of being a human being, but also it was the beginnings of really believing that I wanted to perform, and I wanted to write, and I wanted to direct films. And looking back into the accidents that kind of brought me from Canada to Leicester, to have ended up in a city working that is so connected to Richard and his work, it feels as though it's slightly cyclical. It feels as though, those first impressions that I had that kind of tickled the back of my brain and made me think, this is something I can do, this is something I can work towards, and I know the tone and I know what I want to accomplish with my own work. It's just such a huge inspiration. And when you look at Richard's films, particularly the ones that he's directed, the way in which he manages to somehow combine the cinematic sort of grandeur, but at the same time never forgetting about the human emotions, never forgetting about where the story actually lies. And you see, when you see a blockbuster, a modern blockbuster, for the last 20, 30 years, whenever it sort of fails on an audience level, it's because that's been forgotten. It's because the spectacle is taken over from what the core and the heart of the story is. And I think the beautiful thing about Richard's films as an actor and as a director, that never gets forgotten, that it's always about the people. It's always about the performances and the story. And the cinematography helps to tell that story. So you get the best of both worlds. And I think it's very easy to be blasé about that, about presenting an audience with something that they can be dazzled by, but at the same time quite genuinely moved by. And as an actor, just the range of performances that Richard has presented on screen for those 20, 30 years when he was working regularly in movies, and every time you never knew what you were going to get. You never knew, there wasn't a stock character that recurred over his whole career. There was always just that little step to the left, just taking the character in a different direction. But at the same time, even with something like 10 Rillington Place, even though it's a cold and it's a chilling character, he still presents you that kernel of humanity at its worst, but he makes it a real person. He makes it someone that you don't empathize with, but you certainly understand a little bit better how that can exist in our world. And while that makes it all the more chilling, it's a rare gift for any actor, and it's something that seemed to come so naturally. I'm sure, like with all actors, that the enormous amount of hard work that must have gone into that, but it always translated on screen as just this natural presentation of another human being. And, just in life, we know how difficult it is to kind of get that understanding of someone else, to make that kind of connection, to actually get inside someone else's skin and kind of start to figure out what makes them tick. And Richard's work has always been able to kind of sort of tap through that, so that we come away feeling that we understood someone, fictional or real, depending on the story, just that little bit better. And you can take something like Gandhi and you get so many lessons, so many object lessons from Gandhi. Just the perseverance of getting it made in the first place. Been a huge inspiration to me. Like I said, the size and the scope of it without losing the integral story of sort of one man's life and the effect that he had on people. And it's clear that the Richard Attenborough has been inspired by people's stories. If you look at films like Gandhi, look at films like Cry Freedom, and I don't think it's overestimating to say that. And while he would never admit to this himself, but he has become one of those people. He's become one of those people whose life has had a knock-on effect that's almost incalculable. I mean, we've been particularly honored making this film to speak to a lot of people that have known Richard and have worked with him in a lot of different capacities. And the same thing that keeps getting repeated over and over and over again is what an impact he has. And that's an impact in terms of, in Leicester, the things that he's done for the city, the things that will live on for generations as changes that were made in the city that he helped to make happen, but also the individuals that he's affected. The fact that his being present and his being their friends or their co-worker or their inspiration has actually changed them for the better. And I think all of us, no matter what we do for a living, no matter whether we're in the arts or we're working in local government or we're trying to make something happen, knowing that someone can have that lasting impact, I mean, that's a life well spent. There's no denying that. And I think as much as I sort of absolutely adore the man's work, and he's been a huge inspiration, a large part of why I do what I do, and one of the reasons why we're so privileged to be making this film for Richard's birthday, is that he gives you that goal of working towards just having a positive impact, of actually taking all the things you see and all the things you learn on all the heroes that you have and turning that into something positive and spending your life doing things that have a positive effect. And that doesn't take anything away from him being a strong artist. We see so many people, it feels like, although there has to be this kind of darkness at the heart of everything in order to be artistic. And I think Richard shows that you can be a good person, a kind person, but still have that steely determination to get things done and to have an impact and to push through the obstacles. And for me, that last point, that pushing through the obstacles to achieve the things that you want to achieve, if there's a point of inspiration that I think that we can all cling on to, is that nothing is beyond our grasp if we're willing to persevere and to put all of ourselves into it and pull all of our energies, but also to bring other people around, to inspire other people to work towards the same goal. And if I can sort of hold on to a fraction of that, then I'll feel like I'm moving forward in the right direction. And I have Richard Attenborough to thank for that. He is genuinely one of the greatest and most magnanimous talents that this country has produced.